everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric here with AJ in Austin, Texas. This is episode 178. Today is Wednesday, June 7th. How's it going, AJ?
Going well, man. We got some rain today. That was good because it's
cooled down a little bit.
It's going to get really hot. I know it's going to get very, very, very hot, so it's nice to cool down a little bit here. Looking forward to this episode. It's kind of funny, you pulled it up, and we're going to talk about Chase a little bit later in the core content and how to ultimately use Chase points and transfer them. And it's been since episode 18 since we actually really got into Chase points.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the date is, but that would have been somewhere back in late 2013, maybe early 2014 that episode would have aired.
Well over 2 years ago.
Yeah, long time. Lot has changed, but kind of surprisingly, one of the things that hasn't changed is Chase is still one of the best types of points that you can possibly accrue to give yourself a lot of flexibility to be able to book travel pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to go through this. We've got some stats to share from our recent redemptions. One of the points of inspiration for this show was just taking a look at how many people have Chase points, how many people have saved money on flights using Chase points, and how many cards people are tracking in our system that earn Chase Ultimate Rewards.
Yeah, and right now Chase has some really good offers on their credit card. So,
all right, so we're going to get into that in the core content. Today, we also have a couple of listener questions and stories that came back. So we're going to get to those, and we've also got some news. So let's get started with United expanding basic economy basically to all domestic routes. And I ran into this when I was actually booking my flight to Traverse City for the wedding and a couple of weeks. I was looking at United flights because a lot of them are relatively cheap sometimes out of Austin. And then I realized what I was getting into with the basic economy.
Yeah, essentially United is just acting like a discount carrier as far as the privileges you normally have as a passenger. It's more of like the experience of flying Spirit or flying Ryanair, where you don't have the ability to select your seat, you don't get to bring bags. I want to say they've got kind of a funky little, you can have a carry-on but not a real carry-on.
Yeah, that's the big difference, by the way, between Delta and United. Now, Delta got out in front of this. They did it first, which is kind of typical of Delta. They seem to be leading in a lot of things, but they still let you bring your rollerboard carry-on bag and a backpack if you want. So you can technically have two carry-ons without having to worry about checked bag fees. With the United version, you can't bring a full-size carry-on.
It's just a personal bag.
The roller one's not going to happen. It's got to be a backpack or a briefcase or something relatively small, and definitely not with wheels. And so that's going to be tough. And mostly just on people if you don't know that is a basic economy fare. Now, United's website seems to do a pretty good job of, they make you confirm 2 or 3 times, yes, I accept these just awful requirements here for this ticket. But I think if you book this ticket from an online travel agency like Orbitz and Expedia, I haven't looked through all of them, but you got to be careful. So just know that Domestic has rolled this out to a lot of domestic routes. And if you're booking a United ticket and it seems cheap, which is obviously usually what you're looking for when you're searching, you may want to book directly through United to make sure that you don't accidentally book one of these basic economy fares that has all these restrictions.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if United's fares actually get cheaper, because what United's corporate speak has been is no, we're just passing through savings to the customer. But some skeptics in our space, people that really follow this stuff, are saying, no, you're just trying to get fat on your margins. You're actually not going to drop the price. You're just going to kind of rephrase what economy flights are. So that'll be interesting to see. Speaking of,
by the way, as far as how to figure it out, it's not like people in our circle of points and miles enthusiasts are really creative. They just looked up what the fares were before basic economy got rolled out and then looked up the same ones. And big surprise, the old version before basic economy existed, that flight is this, whatever they were selling it for, say it was $150 for a particular route, that's now the basic economy fare. So you're not saving money. They just increase the price to get all the benefits you normally get.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of United, a flight I would not want to be in basic economy on, they just launched a direct between LA and Singapore.
one of, if not the longest flights in the world. This one, I think, I want to say that in like one direction of travel, it's over 17 hours that it's blocked out at. Now, this is one of those situations where, depending on which way you're flying, you've got potentially some tailwind that actually shaves more than an hour or two off the total flight time going the other way.
The faster way would be just over 15 hours, but that's a long ass flight. I've done the 15-hour flight dance before, and that is a lot of time to be spending on a plane.
Especially, so I mean, this could be a really nice opportunity to redeem for business class. The award tickets are not available on this route yet, so they haven't opened up the award calendar. If you're looking at this, there are some pretty cheap options if you're actually willing to put yourself through that much time in economy. A one-way flight is under $500. So, you know, for getting to Singapore, it could be a good option. I would say the other thing that I was kind of like vaguely aware of is that Singapore Airlines is also intending to compete on this route. I think they've already got the San Francisco to Singapore, and they're looking at the LA, but they need to like wait for some aircraft delivery. I think they're going to operate that on the A350. So if your plans are a little bit further out, that's actually probably a much nicer experience to be in economy. I would certainly take Singapore economy over a United operated flight.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, shifting gears away from United, we'll get actually back to United a little bit because they're a pretty strong Chase transfer partner, but have some interesting news with JetBlue. So they're going to kind of launch a little pilot with facial recognition for boarding. So we touched on Delta doing some stuff with facial recognition for picking up your luggage, for checked baggage, but it looks like JetBlue is now going to do some facial recognition stuff at the gate when boarding. And so it looks like this is going to be on JetBlue's Boston to Aruba flight. They're going to test this out. So that's kind of a, very high tech, crazy world we're living in.
It is very much so.
Sci-fi.
Not a reason that I would fly to Aruba just to try it out, but I'd love to see this in action, even just being like at the gate and kind of, just watching if you got another flight that's in the same terminal.
Whoever's on the tech side of this is making a bunch of money unless they just spent an absurd amount of money building the damn things, because I want to say the Delta kiosks that they bought a few machines, of for Minnesota, $500,000 a pop.
Yeah, it's basically like buying an MRI machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Something of that nature. All right, so next up, we've got some positive news, and a lot of you guys out there may have noticed that your credit score ticked up recently. The average American credit score has hit a record high. I believe this was from the U.S. Consumer Report. It was featured in the Wall Street Journal. I think a big reason for this is, just a lapse of time. So, the crisis in 2008 obviously put a lot of people that were sort of living paycheck to paycheck on the edge and made for a lot of situations of foreclosures on mortgages and bankruptcies. So a lot of those things are starting to drop off. 7 years typically is the amount of time for a bankruptcy to stay on your credit report. That's really good news.
Do you think that some of it also may be slowly we've seen it being rolled out, a more sane approach to credit that has to do a little bit more with actual risk than some really kind of bizarre things? Like, you had something a long time ago that happened. It just made absolutely no sense. The fact,
I think the weighting on certain types of collections, we talked a few episodes, maybe a couple of months back about medical collections and some of the new Vantage Score algorithms that are going to take into account collections that have been paid, and so those don't hurt you, and also just medical collections are not really allowed to be evaluated in the same way. So there's definitely some positive things that are happening across the board there. But I guess the big takeaway here is it's always important to check in on your credit score. We still really like Credit Karma as a free resource. It gives you access to 2 out of your 3 credit reports. So you've got Equifax and TransUnion.
Yeah.
And so that's really nice that you can see your whole credit report and also get an estimate of your credit score, which is calculated through the Vantage Score. So that's something that's worth taking a look at if you haven't. And hopefully some of you guys out there are beneficiaries of this and are going to see your credit score moving up in the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of credit scores, you need a credit score to get a credit card. Southwest has a couple of really nice offers that are a little bit higher than we've seen in the past. So we got 60,000 rapid rewards sign-up bonus on a couple cards. Both have a $2,000 minimum spend.
Yeah, so the Southwest, generally we've seen 50K is probably the max. These cards, these bonuses are available to anybody that hasn't had these cards in the past. If you had one of these cards a long time ago, like more than 2 years ago, it's possible, but we don't really have all the data points on that. So generally speaking, chase cards are not the ones that you can get bonuses multiple times. But this is on the Southwest Plus and the Southwest Premier card. So those are both personal versions of the Southwest card. I believe there's actually an equivalent 60K offer for the business cards as well. So we will put all those links in the show notes. I think, the big thing to keep in mind is that these cards do count against 524. So if you have less than 5 cards open in the last 2 years, definitely listen carefully to the core content that we're going to go through today at the end of the show, because there are some cards that are definitely better than these ones for most people.
Yeah, if it comes down to that. One nice thing about these big bonuses, though, is it does position you very well to get the companion pass.
Yes, it
but
does.
then again, that's a whole other thing depending on where you live and where you want to travel and if you have somebody to travel with. But definitely something to consider if you do a lot of domestic travel with one other person.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got a couple of listener emails that I really wanted to get to for today's show. Got just really good feedback all around. It's one of my favorite parts about producing the show is that we get to hear from you guys. So Alessandro wrote in and had an idea about a mileage exchange, and it was a really good question, and it's a super common thing. It was actually in reference to a booking success story that we shared a little while back, and the person, I think it was Stephanie, saved a lot of money on a flight because the paid versions of the tickets were just really expensive. And Alessandro was asking about whether it exists out there that you can essentially sell your frequent flyer miles. Maybe he's got a ton of miles and the person that wants to book a really expensive ticket doesn't have those miles. Is there a way that you could exchange some money for those miles? So it's a really good question, and it's definitely possible. There's always that temptation there. Mm-hmm. But what I wrote back to him is really important to know that selling your miles goes against the terms and conditions of pretty much all the frequent flyer programs. It's not illegal, so it's not something that you're going to get in legal trouble for, but the frequent flyer program can just basically kick you out.
Yeah, you can lose your frequent flyer privileges. You can, it can be end game for you.
Yes.
For that particular program.
With that program, and that certainly can be painful. So our advice certainly is to avoid buying or selling miles from somebody that you don't know. On the other hand, however, most programs are pretty flexible about allowing you to book for other people. And so that can be really helpful if you've got a friend that needs to book a ticket just to do something nice to help somebody out. Obviously, the fact that you can book for other people is one of the things that made it possible for us to do the Home for the Holidays campaign last holiday season with Peter Shankman. Tons of people donated their miles. So don't want to get you the wrong idea here. It's totally fine to give away your miles, help somebody out. A really nice thing to do if you happen to be in a position where you have a lot of them. But please, everybody, be very careful. You don't want to buy or sell miles. The people that tend to get their accounts shut down are the folks that are on the selling side. The downside for the people buying miles or just paying somebody to book a ticket with their points for them is that you might show up at the airport and not have a flight. The airline can just unilaterally cancel that, conned. And then you're just kind of stuck with potentially having to buy a really expensive same day airfare because your ticket just got canceled.
Yeah, that's happened to me with concert tickets before. You buy concert tickets that you think are valid, but they are not valid. And you show up and they say, these aren't valid. And you try to say, but you're right. I did buy them from a stranger. And I guess that stranger was an asshole and scammed me. So
yeah. Anyways, Alessandro, thank you a bunch for the idea. As far as it totally makes sense. It's a really good way to be able to exchange
really is
value.
I completely understand where it's coming from. It makes perfectly good sense. You'd think, hey, I earned these things and they're of value. Why wouldn't I? But I don't know.
The airlines, they're bullies, man. They make all the rules. All right, so next up, the other one that I wanted to get to today is from Mike. And Mike wrote in about the content that we talked about last week with the Hertz promotion, so some extra miles with United when you rent through Hertz and with the British Airways. And Mike just made a really good point that my answer didn't necessarily actually make very good logical sense. Just in what he was pointing out is just that a lot of times people maybe don't make the most rational decision. They'll pay extra for something or buy something that they don't need just to earn some extra points. So I thought it was a really good sort of word of caution to really try and do the math. And so just to kind of make sure that I clarify how I think about these things, you guys can check out the show last week if you missed it. I kind of talked a little bit about the different promotions, so I'll stay out of the weeds on exactly the details of that. But the choice was essentially that I was going to be able to pay an extra $50 to upgrade my rental that I was going to get. And I found a nice cheap rental with Avis, and I found a $50 more expensive rental with Hertz. And so the question was, is it worth paying an extra $50 to get maybe 2,000 additional miles? Now, normally 2,000 miles is not worth $50, but if the car that you're renting from Hertz is much nicer and you get to value that,
right,
that's sort of where the decision comes in. Where in my case, I was sort of thinking like it's maybe only going to cost me $15 for the upgrade because the miles are worth $35. And so getting a nice SUV instead of a God knows what kind of smart car I'm going to end up with, so that can be useful. And same idea with purchases. So I bought some stuff through the British Airways promotion, which may still be going on, at least at the time of recording. British Airways is still offering a bunch of extra points, but I think possibly by Wednesday that's going to be over. But it was a situation where I could have bought the same product on Amazon for $21 and I spent $26 through the British Airways shopping portal. So I ended up paying $5 more and getting to pick up about $20 worth of miles.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is Mike makes a really good point that sometimes people fall into the trap of playing the game, and that's exactly what all the big companies want you to do.
That's why it's a billion-dollar industry.
And another thing, I guess, is a word of caution is, when I watch you do things like that, it makes sense to me because I know you're going to put the miles to work, but it's generally not worth it for the average person to spend an extra $5 to try to get an extra $15 because it's a hypothetical $15, and that's only if you use all the points. But I know that you are really good with that, and I know that you really keep tabs on miles and you use them and you fly a lot, and it plays into a bigger scheme. But for a lot of people, probably best to keep it simple unless you're really into it and you really run the numbers and it makes sense to you.
Yeah. All right. So last up, we've got a quick one from Stephanie. We mentioned this a few weeks back. Stephanie applied for a card with Chase, and unfortunately, she got denied because of the 524 rule. However, she actually didn't open 5 cards or more in the last 2 years. And the reason she got denied is that she had been added as an authorized user on somebody else's card. And so the advice that we sent back, and this is one that not everybody knows, although the automated systems with Chase do count authorized user accounts as part of the 524 tally, they will remove those if you call reconsideration. So it's a really simple phone call, maybe takes 10 or 15 minutes to call up Chase and just let them know, hey, a couple of those cards that you're counting against me, I'm an authorized user, those are not my credit card accounts. Can you take those out and see if you can get me approved that way? Well, she wrote back just the other day and let me know that it took about 15 minutes on the phone and got approved. Thank you for the quick response. Really glad to hear that, Stephanie.
Yeah, that's encouraging. That's because that's got to be frustrating when you think you did everything right. You knew about the rule, you knew what, and just that minutia, that little detail.
Exactly. All right, you ready to get into some Chase Ultimate Rewards?
Yeah, man, let's get into it. So like Eric said earlier, this week we're to get back to some of the basics. We haven't really talked about Chase in particular. Featured them on an episode since episode 18. So we're talking about getting maximum value out of Chase, and another thing too that we're gonna feature is kind of. We're going to talk about theory, but we're also going to talk about practice right now, where we've actually used a bunch of Chase points. So we did 46 flights last year, 46 different award tickets with Chase.
Yeah, with Chase Ultimate Rewards being transferred. So I think the big thing for me, and I mentioned this maybe a little at the top of the episode, but I was really surprised by how significant the Chase has been in terms of bookings that people have made with our booking service and just the number of cards that we have. So kind of some high-level stats here. If you actually expand and look at the 7 airline frequent flyer programs that are transfer partners with Chase. We're going to talk about each of those a little bit today, but it was actually 154 tickets if you include all the programs that are transfer partners with Chase. Almost $250,000 in savings, $237,000 in savings, just over 6 million points redeemed. Average cents per point was 3.91.
Yeah.
So that's really valuable.
What that means is that's more than 3x the value Chase gives you as far as the way they market their credit card. So let's say, hey, sign up for the Chase Sapphire Preferred credit card. We'll give you 50,000 points. What does that mean? That's $625 in travel. but actually the way we've done it and we have a track record of is a little over 3x that. So
the 50,000 bonus could actually be worth, let's say, $1,700, $1,800 in travel. That's a lot more than $650. And also, outside of the bookings, we're also currently tracking over 14.5 million Chase points. So that's right there. If you take our current redemption averages, that's worth $500,000 in travel savings. So that's super excited, and I'm really hoping that other folks that already are making up that group that are tracking points with Broaders, if you've got Chase points, hopefully this will help you unlock some of that value. Chase Ultimate Rewards cards. Now we're going to talk in a minute about, obviously, with the 524 rule, Chase cards are some of the first ones that you want to get if you're just starting out. Chase Ultimate Reward earning cards make up almost 30% of all the cards that we've got tracked. So the big ones there are going to be Chase Ink Business Preferred, the Sapphire Preferred, the premium card, the Sapphire Reserve, which has the lounge access, and the Freedom Unlimited. So those are the four main cards that earn Chase Ultimate Rewards. There's a couple other ones, but those are the big ones. And with Chase points, you can transfer to 7 different frequent flyer programs, and that lets you book with 94 different airlines.
I think that right there is where a lot of people get lost when they get introduced into award travel and really understanding the system and making it work for you. Is if you transfer your points to a particular airline's program, say United or Air France, a lot of people have it in their mind that, oh, well, now I'm going to fly Air France. No, contraire, Montferrat. You actually may be flying with one of their partners.
Nice
like
French reference there.
It was, with Korean Air or Delta, because that's some feedback we've gotten in the web app. People have said, I don't want this American Airlines card. I hate American Airlines.
I don't want to fly
but
with
brother,
them.
you're heading to Tokyo, and we're going to put you on Japan Airlines. It's going to be great.
It's way nicer. Don't worry. Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're gonna talk, run through some of the basics. A couple things just on the earning side as far as Chase points. So we already talked a little bit about the 524 rule, but all that means is that you can't open more than 5 cards in a 24-month period, and that's across all banks. So basically, if you've only opened 4 cards in the last 2 years, Chase will let you get 1 more credit card.
There's some exceptions with business cards, but in general, the 524 rule, like you said, 5 cards in 2 years on a rolling basis. So you can re-enter the game and become eligible again after that 5th card, or first card, depending on how you look at it, drops off from being outside of 24 months.
Now, you mentioned something that is really important, and this is kind of it's not necessarily a trap, because I'm always happy when people get value and are able to book the travel that they want. But one of our primary goals is to make sure that you get the most value from your points and you don't spend more points than you have to. And so the easy way to use Chase Ultimate Rewards is to redeem them essentially as cash value.
Right.
And if you have almost all of the Chase products, the credit card products, you're going to get 1.25 cents per point. So that's what we were talking about earlier, where if you do this transfer stuff that we're going to talk about in just a minute, you can get much more value. The reserve card's sort of an exception, where they give you a little bit of extra value. They give you 1.5 cents per point. But
even then, we're still doing 2.5 times that. And if you have the reserve card, there's an annual fee, which there's a lot of reasons it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, even in the best position Chase gives you just to do the simple cash value redemption, we're anywhere from
you're throwing away almost
2.5
half your points, if not more. So let's talk about the airline transfer partners. Now, basics of transferring, 1-to-1 ratio with all the airline transfer partners.
So what that means is if you've got 60,000 Chase points and you transfer those points to United, you will then have 60,000 United points in your United account.
Perfect. And those are instant transfers, which means when you click the button on the Chase website, your points will show up in your frequent flyer account within a few seconds. Usually.
Which is different from some other points that we'll talk about within the next month when we go on more deep dives on transferable points. So that's really nice that they're instant transfers.
It's super helpful. And we're going to talk about why you want to make sure you've got your flights ready to go and you know which ones you want before you transfer, because it's really important that you've got them lined up and your flights are actually available to book with points. The last thing, basics of transferring, is that if you have Chase Ultimate Rewards, you can transfer them to your own frequent flyer accounts, and you can also transfer them to your spouse or partner. So that's a really nice sort of additional flexibility that you have. If you have a partner that you live with, you should be able to transfer your points. It also applies to business partners. The fact that you and I both have a version of the Chase Ink Plus card, I can transfer my Chase points over to your United account, which is super helpful as well. All right, so let's meet the programs.
Yeah, so the 7 programs that Chase Ultimate Rewards can transfer to is British Airways Executive Club, Air France Flying Blue, Korean Air Sky Pass, Singapore KrisFlyer, Southwest Rapid Rewards, United Mileage Plus, and then Virgin Atlantic Flying Club.
All right. So starting out, let's talk about why you would want to transfer to one of these programs versus another. Just high level, the basic idea is number one, the price to get where you want to fly in points required might be different. The price that you have to pay in cash might be different, and that just means the taxes and fees and any other carrier imposed
out-of-pocket costs.
Bullshit
Yeah.
fees, essentially. And the third thing is that maybe you want to fly with a particular airline, or you want to book a particular itinerary, something that's convenient, shorter stopovers, those sorts of things. So, in other words, the program that you choose can determine how many miles it costs, how much cash it costs, and how good your routing is.
Yeah, exactly. And it really depends on where you want to go. So, an example of how the pricing can be different is, let's say Europe, for example, between the United States and Europe. If you go in economy class with United, that's going to be 60,000 United Mileage Plus points round trip. If you go in Air France, it's going to be 50,000. So that's where there's a difference
It's a nice
there.
savings there.
It is a nice savings, but if we factor in the price in cash, the 50,000 deal with Air France is going to be a little bit more expensive. You're going to have to pay a little bit more in taxes and fees.
Yeah, and I want to get to that even more specifically because I've got kind of a more extreme example for how the money amount can be different. But the other partner that's kind of interesting to Europe is British Airways because you and I took a one-way flight from Barcelona to JFK, and that only cost 20,000 points one way. So that's even better than, that makes out to 40 round trip. So that's a really good deal, even better than Air France. However, if you're flying from LA, let's say your itinerary is like Los Angeles, New York, Madrid, and then Berlin's your final destination, that's going to cost you 85,000 points round trip, which is way more than both Chase and
that's
United.
something that you really have to understand when you're transferring to these different programs is different airline programs price this stuff differently. And there's really 2 big schools of thought that we'll talk about here, and then I guess there's kind of a third funky hybrid, Southwest, but generally there's zone-based and there's distance-based charts. So the example we gave with United and Air France, that would be a zone-based. From the continental U.S. to Europe, this is the price.
It's a flat rate. And
British,
obviously different for business or economy, but no matter where you are, you could be on the West Coast, you could be on the East Coast. If you're flying from the U.S. to somewhere in Europe, it's a flat rate. That makes things simple. With the British Airways version, it's based on how far you fly, which is why the JFK
literally the distance you fly.
Right. So JFK to Barcelona obviously is much shorter. It's cheaper. Whereas the route from LA to New York to Madrid to Berlin, that's a lot more distance covered. And so that's going to cause the price to go up. So the second one, and you already gave a decent example of that, is the price in money would be different. And so the example that I have drawn up here is actually for business class. This is from the East Coast of the US to the UK. And if you use United Mileage Plus, you're looking at paying 140,000 miles round trip. But the taxes and fees are under $300. It's like 291 is sort of the average. I looked up a few different examples. Now, Chase points also transfer to Virgin Atlantic, and they have much more attractive pricing in terms of the number of points you need. If you use Virgin Atlantic's program, you're only going to pay 95,000. So 95 versus 140. If that's the only information you have, you'd think, wow, 95 is way cheaper.
But there's $1,000 out of pocket, and this is a really difficult thing to podcast about because everyone is in different situations. But the way we've kind of framed it in the past that I think is a good mental framework for the listeners is: are you miles rich or are you miles poor? Are you cash rich or are you cash poor? Do you have a shitload of miles but you don't make much money? Well, then hell yeah, burn more miles and keep the out-of-pocket stuff down. But if you don't have that many miles but you make a bunch of money and you're happy to spend a little bit on travel, save your miles, get a couple flights, paying higher taxes and fees and having a bigger net return. So just kind of weighing all the things together.
All right, so we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown just sort of by region and talk about some of the pros and cons here in a second. But I wanted to address the third point that we brought up here about booking flights on a particular airline or trying to get the best itinerary, sort of trying to find the travel day that's not going to give you a 12-hour layover at some airport that has no VIP lounge or whatever. So if you look at the Chase points, as I said at the top of the show, Chase points, when you transfer to those 7 frequent flyer programs, can book on 94 different airlines. That's
Yes.
a lot of different airlines operating flights. So the breakdown here, there's 31 in Star Alliance. All of those are available. There are 13 in One World Alliance. There are 19 in SkyTeam Alliance. So your Chase points, depending on where you transfer them, could book flights on any of those airlines.
Right.
And there's also 31 independent airlines. So that's a ton of different options. And we really kind of debated like how far to go into this because we want to try and keep this as simple as possible. And we're actually working on a resource that's going to sort of boil down to the most valuable, sort of the featured programs for each region.
Yeah.
So if you've got plans to go to Asia or to Europe, you can just kind of look at what the best uses for your ultimate rewards
the inspiration
points would be.
was we looked around for resources and we weren't all that encouraged with what we found as far as other resources other blogs had made for, hey, you got Chase points, how do you put them to work? And we had yet to see something where it was a simple resource where you said, hell, I just want to go to Europe, and then you are given your best options for Europe or Asia or South America, whatever. So that's what we're working on. But this is, man, I think this is something that I think this is really a point where a lot of people get lost in points and miles. And one way that if I'm talking with somebody that doesn't know anything about points and miles and we get into alliances, what has worked best for me to communicate is just Star Alliance is United, One World is American, and SkyTeam is Delta. Because there are people that might know Delta and their partners, but they didn't even know it's called SkyTeam. So
that's a great
especially
point.
being Americans, with those being the major programs. You know, we'll talk about some other ones, but you know, United Star Alliance, American One World, Delta SkyTeam.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing, this is just sort of like one additional way to think about your transferable points, like your Chase Ultimate Rewards. Now, AJ and I just talked about how the price in miles can be different, the price in cash, and maybe the routing. So let's say you find a really good routing on Alaska Airlines. Just for example, you've done some research and you found that Alaska has flights available where you want to go. Now, because Chase Ultimate Rewards transfers to all 7 of these programs, there's actually 3 different programs that can book on Alaska.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too deep into this, but always keep in mind that you might have more than one price that's an option to you. So for example, if you wanted to book on Alaska, you could transfer your Chase points to Korean Air, which is a little bit more tricky of a program. That's not a super popular one, but it's an option. They are partners with Alaska. You can transfer to British Airways Executive Club and use that distance-based chart, and they can book on Alaska. So if you had a bunch of short Alaska flights, that's probably your answer. And you could also transfer to Air France. They can book on Alaska as well. Same idea with Delta. If you want to fly on Delta, you've got Virgin Atlantic can book on Delta, Korean Air can book on Delta, and Air France. So the idea here, you don't have to have all this memorized, but just know if there's multiple programs that can book the flights you want, you have an opportunity to do some arbitrage and compare the prices and just pick the program that works the best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, man. One more thing I want to touch on real quick before you take a deeper dive into the programs is just to try to illustrate for people the value of these points being transferable as far as the options it gives you. There's more airlines, there's more options, more availability. So like you said, 94 different airlines, where if you're just hanging out with United miles, you got 31 options pretty much, more or less.
Yep.
And a Chase point can always be United mile, and a United mile can never be Chase point. You know, like you're really at the top of the food chain as far as your reach and your ability and your options go.
Yeah. The overlap and the fact that you've got just a bunch of different programs that you can move to, and you just wait until you find the flights that you like, and then you transfer your points. And so that's really important. We're not going to get into searching for award availability on this show. We've talked about it on a lot of other ones, but that is sort of the final frontier here. So you can find the best pricing, you can find the airline that you want to fly, but the last step that you got to take, and you should always do this before you transfer your points, is you want to make sure that those flights are bookable with rewards points. So you just need to look up and see if there are available seats, and definitely encourage you guys to check out some of our archives. We've got a lot of shows that we've talked about the different strategies for searching. Or if you don't want to go through the hassle, we'd love to do it for you. You can head over to the show notes. We'll have a link to our booking service in there. And if you just sit back, tell us when you want to fly, and Janelle and our awesome booking team will get to work and find the flights for you.
Yeah, she really does a great job. It's fun watching the feedback we get from happy customers on that.
All right, so let's run through just some high-level stuff, some things to keep in mind about each of the transfer partners. We're going to go a little bit light on Virgin Atlantic and Korean because, like I said at the top of the show, those are kind of more niche. They're harder to use, tend to have higher out-of-pocket taxes and fees and stuff like that.
Our
Let's talk
assumption
about
is
the other
that
five.
there's only a small percentage of the listeners out there that would really get a bunch of value out of it.
Yeah, well, and even just when I was doing the math on how many bookings, like we've used over 1 million miles with United. We've helped people use over 600,000 with Air France, 700,000 or 800,000 with Singapore. So that's where like the bulk of people's Chase points are being put to work. I think we had like 3 Korean bookings, and mind you, they were awesome Korean bookings. They
Right.
came out to like 10 cents per point or something ridiculous, but it's super rare because it's kind of a pain in the ass of a program. So let's talk about the 5 big ones here. Starting out with British Airways.
Yeah, the first one, British Airways. So, like we talked about earlier, the difference between distance-based and zone-based. So, British Airways is distance-based, so you get to generally get better deals on direct flights, and you got to understand exactly how many miles are going to be flown. It's a member of the One World Alliance, so if you're thinking in America terms, that's American Airlines and all of their partners as well. As far as our experience booking with them, the majority of our bookings have been in economy, about 85%, so that's 27 out of 32, and the average taxes and fees have been a little bit under $90.
Yeah, and that's pretty good. The main reason why it's so heavy on economy with British Airways is that about a year ago, I think, maybe a year and a half
Yeah,
ago,
they had pretty heavy inflation on their premium cabin space.
And they essentially went
charged
from-
way more miles to be up front in the plane.
Precisely. They went from, it used to be that if it was, let's say, 10,000 miles in economy, it was going to be 20,000 in business class. And then they just stuck premium economy in the middle there.
Yeah.
And so now premium economy is double economy and business is triple economy. So they just really put a multiplier on the business
It's like the
costs.
exact opposite thing of what United did with their economy. As far as moving down, they moved upstream, with stuff?
Yeah. So the bottom line here, it's not that there are no good business class tickets to book with British Airways, but it's much more rare to get a really nice deal in terms of points. You might still find your preferred airline, you might find a great itinerary, and it might be worth paying some extra points to get that. But as you can see, 85% of the bookings that we've advised or helped people to book with British Airways have been in economy. That's generally where the best value is going to be. Next up is Air France. So they're a member of the SkyTeam Alliance, which in the American context is going to be Delta. And they also have a bunch of other partner airlines. SkyTeam, I believe, has 19 different airlines that are included in the alliance. So Air France has got a great relationship with all of them. And they also have quite a few independent airlines. So there's some good ones. I've used Air France before with GOL Airlines in Brazil, which is an independent. So there's a nice list of airlines that are available there. I would say the big thing with Air France is probably the promo awards. They've got slightly better pricing. So they're zone-based chart, which means just like United and Singapore, they base the price on region. So U.S. to Europe's a flat rate, U.S. to South America is a flat rate. But the nice thing with Air France is that every month or so, they release a couple of city pairs for every region of the world that has discounted booking. And the discounts tend to be between 25 and 50%. Generally, can be really nice.
Generally, every month, Air France gives you a chance to go somewhere interesting in business class for under 50,000 points.
Yeah.
One way. So a round trip for under 100,000. And when we talked about that example earlier, you gave 140K between the U.S. and Europe and United, and then just under 100K for $1,200, but with Air France, it would look more like 90-some thousand points, and it'd probably be maybe $300 or so.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
Or less.
So that's a really good opportunity. If you're looking at using Air France as your transfer program that you're going to move points from Chase, definitely take a look at the promo awards. Typically, you have about a 2-month window to book and about a 2-month window for travel with those discounted prices. So,
And they're limited availability. So in the beginning of the month when they release their promo awards, if you see one that you like, take advantage, because if you wait a few weeks, it may not be there.
early bird gets the free flight. Okay, next up we've got Singapore Airlines. Now Singapore, like United, is in Star Alliance. So they've got all the same partners there. Star Alliance is the biggest alliance with 31 member affiliate airlines. And Singapore also has some unique independent partners. So there's some other options outside of Star Alliance that can be really nice. Recently, Singapore made a significant change that they are not adding fuel surcharges to tickets. And so that's a really good deal.
Good news for people like us.
It brought the prices down a lot. And that actually makes me not really trust our average totally. The average taxes that over the last 2 years with Singapore have been about 170. I'm going to say that that's probably going to end up closer to 100 now that they've dropped
What was
those fuel
your
surcharges.
flight back from South America out of pocket? taxes and fees?
It was about $100 total, but it was a one-way in business class. Business class tends to be a little bit more expensive, and so that can be a factor. But I would say that you're probably looking at closer to 100 average for most destinations round trip now that the fuel surcharges have dropped off. Again, as I said, it's a zone-based chart. It's pretty similar to United in terms of pricing. Every once in a while, there's maybe 5,000 miles more for United versus Singapore or vice versa. So those are kind of two that you can compare head to head because they can book the same airlines for the most part, at least with their Star Alliance partners. And so that's kind of a nice trade-off where you can just see which program you prefer. I tend to go towards United in the economy part because the price is almost always the same as Singapore, and it's just a little bit easier. United's website's good for booking. Whereas with business class tickets, I kind of like Singapore better. The mileage is generally a little bit better than United, and the taxes and fees are, now that the fuel surcharges aren't there, it's going to be roughly the same.
Yeah, speaking of United, that's the next program. So like Singapore, like Air France, they are zone-based. And one thing to note about the program is they have some really generous routing rules. So you can do a stopover. You can get
that's the feather in their cap.
You can get a free stop and open jaw. So what that means is, if you're flying, through Europe, you can stop in a city and you could spend a few days, or you could actually spend a significant amount of time. It's anything more than 24 hours is what they would consider a stopover.
Right.
And then open jaw allows you to fly home from a different city than you flew into. So for one that we've done in Asia quite a few times is you fly into Bangkok and we would fly home from Ho Chi Minh City. Airfare's cheap, connected us there. Yeah.
I was actually talking to somebody today on the phone, so I had a consult, and that's something. If you have an account with the Abroaders app, there's a button right in there that you can schedule a consult if you really want to get into the strategy for your points and miles. And this guy, we're going to call him Steve. He was planning a trip potentially to Europe in business class with his wife, and so he had about 100,000 Chase and about 200,000 United. So if you move the Chase points to United, that's 300,000, which means that you're within range of 2 business class tickets at $140 each round trip. So what I was explaining to Steve is that you can fly into London, take the train to Paris, so that's your open jaw because you're not flying between those. And then from Paris, you could, let's say, stop in Athens or Rome, and then fly home from there. And so that way you get to see 3 cities with all business class flights. You got 1 train ride, but you got every flight but 1 taken care of, and you're still going to pay the exact same price as if you flew from New York to Paris to New York.
Exactly.
So that's a really good deal, and that's something. Some of the other programs have the stopover, but United is just more generous. And so if you're looking to really maximize, a short trip to Europe, especially Europe, because Europe's a great place where the stopover is extra valuable because everything's
You're in proximity,
so close.
man.
You can use a train here and there. So that's a really nice thing. With United, we've booked I think 64 tickets, and we've had about 60-40 split economy to business. So still more economy than business, but United is really good value for business class. It's maybe a little bit more expensive in miles.
It's gotten a little bit more expensive in the past year and a half. I forget when they made the change. I wouldn't be surprised to see that gap expand a little bit, but not a whole lot. I mean, still good stuff, man. You want to get into Southwest? I'll let you take this one. This is kind of the funky hybrid program.
Southwest is easy. So the downside to Southwest is you're definitely not going to get as good of value as you could with some of the other programs, just because Southwest bases the price that you need to pay in points on the price in cash of the ticket. So in other words, if they're selling a $400 ticket to one destination and an $800 ticket to the other destination, the number of points required for the $800 one is going to be twice as many. It just moves up exactly in line. And the bottom line is that Southwest points are worth about 1.65 cents per point. So if you compare that with the rates that we've seen on average with Chase points, which, as I said at the beginning, is 3.9, you're getting well under half of the value if you use them with Southwest.
The only argument for Southwest on that is Southwest flights are generally cheaper than the major airlines, so they're going to close the gap on how many flights you can get. So like the points required for a flight might be a little bit less, but ultimately point for point, if you had the chance between 100,000 Southwest and 100,000 Ultimate Rewards, you take the Chase points all day, every day without consideration.
Yeah. The other thing with Southwest, so they're actually expanding a little bit internationally. So, right now they've got some limited limited international destinations in the Caribbean, in Mexico. I think they're looking at flights to Lima if they haven't started them already.
I know they've talked about South America. I think they just launched a new one to Jamaica, maybe.
Okay.
But they go some places. I think you can go to Aruba and go all around Mexico. I've flown Southwest to the Dominican Republic, so you can. That's kind of their reach right now. But I know they've got the sights set on South America.
Yep. And so the other thing, we don't have a ton of data on Southwest, and the reason is that Southwest is super easy. So you just go to their website, it tells you how much it costs. There's no blackout dates. There's none of this availability crap with Southwest because every flight's for sale with points as well as cash. So that's the plus side of the Southwest. There can be value there. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is if you have a companion pass, your Southwest points are worth double. So if you are traveling with your spouse, significant other, whoever's listed as your companion on your Southwest account, that's where transferring from Chase Ultimate Rewards to Southwest is a really good deal because then you'd pay for one passenger in points and you get the other passenger free.
So think about the Southwest, or I guess I should say don't think about the Southwest Companion Pass the way that you'd think about Alaska or Delta's companion certificate. This is anything goes. If you've got points and you can book a flight with points for minimal taxes and fees, you get the other one free. So that's pretty exceptional,
Yeah. All right, so I think that's going to be a wrap for this week's show. I hope everybody got some value out of there. If you guys have questions about Chase Ultimate Rewards, highly encourage you guys to write into us. Email is support@abroaders, and we'll try and get the answers.
I've got something, a little bit of an interesting teaser, and I can't say too much because I want to get permission from this person, but we're going to be meeting with somebody, and I'm curious, a meeting we have Wednesday. I'm curious to see if he would be okay if we share any of our conversations on the podcast. Not nitty gritty, super deep details about his experience in this industry, but we're going to be meeting with somebody who's kind of a player in the industry.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And I'm going to be curious if he's okay with us sharing some of his insights because Southwest really made me think of him because when I met with him before, he was in a friendly way railing on Rapid Rewards pretty hard for some stuff. But yeah.
All right. Well, to be determined on an upcoming episode. Last calls to action here. If you guys haven't signed up for the app, a lot of the reason that we were able to provide all this information about what types of points are out there and how much they're worth are because we're helping a ton of folks track their points and miles, earn the right points, especially if you're confused about the 524 rule, don't know if you're eligible for those Southwest cards, want some help getting a companion pass. All of those things are really easily solved by our team, and it's totally free. So if you haven't done so yet, sign up for the app, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.